Hi, it's Leonie. I'm here today to talk to you about heat setting your fabric and give you some basic hints and tips on how to get a good result when you're heat setting at home just with your normal iron. So stay with me and we'll run through that. Well, I came here today to tell you a story, but in the interim, my story hasn't turned out quite like I expected. I wanted to show you this piece of fabric, which is something I Gelli printed a few weeks ago. And you can see here that there are big sections that are no longer intact. They washed out when I put this in the washing machine. And I was going to use this piece as an example of the importance of heat setting your fabric. Now what's happened is since then I've run a whole series of tests on my fabric with heat setting and not heat setting and washing the same fabrics at the same time, and I didn't get this result. So it's going to be interesting. I'm going to show you what happened and then I'm going to come back and draw some conclusions about this piece of fabric. Now, if you're not intending to use your fabric for a practical item, so you might use it for wall hanging or a substrate for a piece of embroidery, you don't need to do this step. But if you're going to do anything with your fabric which will involve washing either often or even infrequently, you really need to heat set your fabric. So I'm going to do some tests with some of the fabric I've prepared previously. So I have here some Gelli print on my cotton sheeting. This one is a Gelli print on poly cotton. This is also Gelli print on cotton sheeting, but what I've done here is I haven't used the textile base. I've purely used the acrylic paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these three pieces of fabric into smaller sections, which some of which I'm going to heat set, some of which I'll use as a control, and the third piece will be used in a wash fastness test. Here are my three sets of fabric. These ones are going to be heat set and then put in the wash. These ones are going to remain as they are printed, neither heat set nor washed, and these third ones I'm not going to heat set, but I will wash them. It'll be interesting to see how they all turn out. I just have a normal domestic iron here. I've got it set on wool and I've got it set on 0 steam. Now I have tested this with my handy dandy infrared thermometer, and the plate at this stage is well over 160 degrees. So what my textile base manufacturer says is that my fabric needs to be heat set at 150 degrees for 4 to 5 minutes. Now that's a long time with a domestic iron. If you're lucky enough to have a press, go your hardest because it's going to be a lot easier. But it's very important, depending on what textile base you're using, that you actually check the manufacturer's requirements and suggestions for heat setting. So what I'm going to do is I've got here some important stuff from the kitchen. I've got a piece of aluminium foil, I've got my piece of textile that I'm going to heat set, and I've got some silicone baking sheet which is going to protect my fabric and the base of my iron. One thing I'll say just as I'm starting to iron is that I have noticed that there are some fumes coming off this combination of paint and textile base when I iron. So I strongly suggest that you do this next to an open door, an open window, or if you can't get those conditions, maybe near an extractor fan in your kitchen. Anything to avoid having to breathe in those fumes. I just think safety is the most important thing here. Now, you will see that when I first start ironing this particularly, the silicone paper has a tendency just to come up with the iron. As far as I can tell, it's just like some sort of a static effect. It's not sticking to my base plate of my iron at all. The other thing I want to mention while I'm doing this is that the point of the aluminium foil is that it's actually reflecting the heat from the iron back up into the fabric. So it's just giving you better coverage and better heat setting across the board. Now I'll be turning the fabric around to ensure that I get everything under the iron for a reasonable amount of time. And this is quite important because, as I'll show you shortly, I have a piece of fabric where I didn't quite do this. I didn't do a good job of my heat setting, and you can see the result because after I put it through the washing machine, it actually washed great sections of it away. So I just keep doing this. I won't make you sit and watch the whole 4 or 5 minutes of ironing. So now I'm going to put my pieces of fabric through the washing machine. It's going to only be a 15-minute cycle on cold water. I don't see any point in thrashing it at this stage. So these are the ones that have been heat set. They're going to go into a lingerie bag. These are the ones that have not been heat set, and they will go into a separate bag. And these ones are the controls, and they're just going to stay right here. So I'll see you on the other side of the washing machine. Okay, so I've just gone to the washing machine and I've pulled out my 2 bags of fabric. Let's have a look at how they went. So I'm just going to move the control ones out of the road for the moment. These are the heat set fabrics on my left. And I think they've come up pretty well. Just goes that way. This one. And surprise, surprise, even the heat set acrylic has turned out really well. That is something I wasn't expecting. Good stuff. Now I'm just going to take these pieces of fabric off the wet pieces so I can get them dried. And I'm going to look at the pieces which weren't heat set, which were in the bag on my right. They're not looking too shabby actually, which when you think about the fact that the acrylic that I heat set worked well, wouldn't surprise you. Even the polycotton's okay. And there's the non-heat set acrylic. So I think I've been a bit surprised because they have actually all turned out quite well. And the only thing I can say is that the ones that haven't been heat set are actually feeling a bit sticky and gluey. I suppose it's just the paste. They probably won't feel like that when they've been done, but that would be the really obvious thing, that there's all this sort of stuff which is coming off. So that might be one of the issues with those, that even though it hasn't lost a lot of colour, it would be very easy at this stage to lose a whole lot of that surface just purely because of the wet, sticky nature of the paint once it's been through the washing machine. I would be thinking that if I put it in for a longer period of time, that might also make it subject to a lot more abrasion, which would probably rub some of that off. This is the pure cotton, this is the poly cotton. One piece each was heat set, the other piece wasn't. I kept one piece in the middle for a control. And there's really no difference in terms of those being washed. They were washed in a lingerie bag. I can't see any difference. The only thing I found was on the cotton, the paste was very gummy when it had been through the wash and you could physically scrape it off. That was really about the only difference I found. And there was a slight difference in drying time. So then I decided to try these pieces, and again there was one that wasn't heat set, the control, and the one that was heat set, and instead of putting these in a lingerie bag, I just let those go into the machine as was with other items. So there was a towel and a large piece of fabric, and again there's no visible difference in the results between the heat set and the not heat set. Now, having said that, I still think that if you're in a commercial situation or you want to put your fabrics up for sale or you want to put your fabrics into a piece of work, maybe a piece of clothing, a decorative feature that's going to be washed on a regular basis, I would still recommend heat setting. But for anything else, I wouldn't worry about it. I would still probably let it dry and iron it. I don't think there's any big issue with that, and it will just help. But clearly, it made no visible difference on those pieces. And then the surprise of all of them were the pieces that I did purely with acrylic paint and without any textile base underneath it. And these performed as well as the ones that used textile base. So again, the same thing. I put 2 in the wash, which weren't heat set. One was put through just the straight wash. The other piece, I actually washed a second time, like these 3 pieces, washed without being put in a lingerie bag. And again, no noticeable difference. So, frankly, if you don't have textile base, you probably don't need to use it. The only comment I'd make is that I didn't get as nice a coverage just using the pure acrylic than I did with the textile base, and that is the only difference that I can see. So, frankly, no need to actually heat set or to even use a textile base if you don't want to, if you're going to use it in a situation where there's not going to be a lot of washing or overuse of the fabric.